Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today via Skype from Istanbul is Yavuz Baydar of P24, Platform for Independent Journalism, as part of our weekly roundup about Turkey. Yavuz, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be with you.
And today we've obviously asked you to join us because yesterday there was a very important election that took place in Turkey. It was a presidential election, the first time that Turkish citizens could vote directly for the president under new powers with a new constitution. Tell us the outcome of those elections, please, if you will.
Well, I would slightly correct the new constitution part because the entire political game is being played out on the old constitutional ground, and that's also part of the debate is about. The election results, perhaps against the expectations of the opposition camp, at the center field, MHP and CHP, did not proceed to the second round, and Erdogan seemed to have engaged the AKP supporter electoral base enough in the summer heat so that despite the lower turnout all over the place, AKP supporters went to the ballot boxes as opposed to the opposition camp, and Erdogan raised a considerable number of votes and reached 51.8. But that is one aspect. The second aspect is, of course, there were lots of polls saying, more than 4 or 5 polls actually, claiming that he would get 55+%. And that, of course, came perhaps as a blow to the expectations of the AKP leadership. So we are now where we are, 51.8% as opposed to 38% for İhsanoğlu, and Kurdish candidate doing very well. He was very happy yesterday. Selahattin Demirtas reached almost 10%, 9.8, and 10% was critical psychological barrier for the Kurdish political movement, because the political threshold for being elected to the parliament is 10%. So he's almost there. That means that a new dynamic is developing in the Kurdish camp. But we can go into this later. So overall, we are now in a new phase with a lot of unknown consequences in the fall and beyond until 2015.
Again, just to recap for our viewers, there were 3 main contenders for the office of president. As you mentioned, it was current Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan of the AKP. The CHP-MHP had a unified candidate, and the Kurdish People's Democratic Party, Demirtas, who was actually quite young and, as you said, almost doubled his percentage points. When, you know, looking at the map of the results of Turkey, you would almost think that Turkey is divided up into 3 separate countries. I mean, the divisions geographic are quite astounding.
Yes, that is something that we were debating intensely last night at the TV channel. And my point was that we should focus on that intensely because the election result of yesterday came as a very strong confirmation about what we have known for a long time. Division of the country, of the society, on sociological and geographical basis. If you look at the map now, today, after the elections, you see Turkey divided into 3. Southeastern part bordering Iran and Iraq and Syria is now controlled by the Kurdish political movement and its candidate. The heartland Anatolia and the north side, Black Sea coast, is AKP predominantly, and western side, Western Anatolia, is staunchly pro-CHP and MHP. So this is a continuing trend as a result of acrimonious, intense, persistent discourse of Erdogan since Gezi Park protests, but particularly since before the local elections, March 30, and now also in the campaign in the presidential elections, which meant that he went even further in the language, etc. Polarization, division, demonization.
Just as a final question, Yavuz, you know, now with Recep Tayyip Erdogan as president, is Turkey going to be on a new course, or is it going to be more of the same? I mean, as prime minister, he was already basically running the show in Turkey, as from what we see on this side of the border. Is there going to be any fundamental, deep changes taking place in your country?
Well, the presidential elections now over. Turkey is entering a new phase with a series of new dynamics unleashed and also consequences. Domestically speaking, Erdogan, a question for Erdogan is whether or not he now, entering into the presidential palace, will be able to continue to exert control over his party, AKP party. There are already signs, strong signs today, the day after effect, that, for example, President Gül saying that he's coming back to politics, and several other tiny voices are indicating that the party will be entering in a period of internal debate. Another question is whether or not Erdogan, being a good tactician, will call a blitz Congress just 2 days before the end of the Gül's tenure, so that he can block his comeback to the party in a good position. So that's one question. Second question is, of course, whether or not AKP will be able to maintain the same kind of spirit, particularly in economy leadership, Babacan, etc., in the cabinet, because cabinet reshuffle is imminent and nobody knows what Erdogan has in mind. And that can have very strong consequences, that kind of choice. Internationally speaking, a new dynamic is developing with Obama now having decided to arm the Kurdish movement, Kurdish regional government, against the Islamic State militancy, insurgency, and that puts Turkey, Ankara, in a very difficult position, whether to decide to take part, being a partner, as Obama indicated in New York Times interview, with the United States, or continue to play the middle ground, being sympathetic, quote unquote, to ISIS insurgency. And that is a big question mark now, what Ankara will do about Iraq policies, in general, regional policies. So that puts Erdogan in a very difficult position, because the more he plays the Kurdish card, the more he will rock the boat inside the AKP party, because there is a backbone of nationalism also rooted in the AKP party. So we are heading towards a very complicated situation. Turkey's case is already complicated, but we are expecting more complications.
Yeah, absolutely. The regional dimension is very, very complicated, very complex, and I hope that in the coming weeks we will have an opportunity to look at the role that Turkey will be playing in the region, especially with the insurgency taking place now, its relations with the EU, its relationship, a very tenuous relationship with the United States. So we will be talking to you in the coming weeks and months to shed further light on the circumstances on the ground. So thank you very much for joining us, Yavuz.
Thank you, Marie.
I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest via Skype from Istanbul was Yavuz Baydar, a journalist from P24 Platform for Independent Journalism. Stay with CivilNet.